right, so we're going to talk about the SEC cybersecurity rules, context of CISOs, what it means to them. So first question, what is the SEC asking of public companies in the event of an incident with these rules?
So the SEC's final rules went into effect September 5th, 2023. So what they're asking now. And in the event of an incident, you have 4 days to be reporting a material cyber incident to the SEC on your 8K form if you're a US company, or there's other forms you use if you're a foreign company that's trading in the United States. What that means is that you have to briefly describe the details of the incident, and then over time, provide more and more information if it's materially relevant, if it's interesting to the investing public. That's what the SEC is trying to get at.
So you mentioned that word material a couple of times, and from what I've heard talking to CISOs a few times, that's kind of the hang-up, the initial hang-up in terms of defining exactly what material means. Is it understood? Is it defined? Is it ambiguous? What's your take on that?
So I think the biggest change of this rule is that every CISO is going to need to add a securities lawyer to their incident response team, because materiality is a well-known concept in securities law, but not in security. And so for cybersecurity, we're getting used to this. Material is something that is significantly large enough that an investor should care about it. But that's not something that's a commonly understood term for cybersecurity professionals. So you really have to turn to the experts on the securities side of your community to pull them in for expertise.
Are there other areas that you anticipate any confusion or stress for CISOs in respect to the rules?
So the final rule does something that's actually pretty helpful for CISOs, and that's that it gives CISOs new ammunition to drive boards of directors and corporate leadership to develop stronger cybersecurity plans. And that's really all good, because every company should have a strong cybersecurity plan. It also encourages CISOs and corporate leadership and boards to train on those plans, so know what happens before a crisis occurs. And then every year in companies' annual reports and materials, they'll have to disclose their cybersecurity issues and incidents, disclose that they have a plan, disclose their third-party vendors that are helping them with those plans and with their cybersecurity. So it's driving for a much more holistic and much more cohesive culture for cybersecurity. Ultimately, that's great for CISOs. Where it makes challenging circumstances for CISOs or around incidents, because the timing is going to be much tighter to have to report. 4 days is not a lot of time. And so that's going to put a lot more pressure on the incident response process than we've had in place before.
So just bouncing off of that for a second, as you said, 4 days is not a lot of time. The scale of a breach of an incident isn't always apparent within that time frame. How does that impact notification? Are there adjustments that are allowed down the line?
So one of the things that's really fascinating about the SEC's rule is that it requires notification within 4 days, regardless of what is known at the time, if the company believes that it's material. So you may have a sense that it's a large incident, but you may not actually know. So assume that your house is on fire and you've called the fire department. You're now going to hit pause and you're going to let your insurance adjuster know that you're in the middle of a fire and you're not sure how bad the damage is going to be, but you've got to go give them a heads up, because that's the new law. And then over time, as you unpack it, then you'll give the SEC more notice. That's going to take some getting used to. What that means as a heads up for lawsuits, for additional investigations, for the SEC to bring subpoenas and to do its own enforcement actions, that's going to be the real risk area that people watch. For CISOs, that's the biggest concern, because we watched what happened following the SolarWinds incident, where the SEC then served what's called a Wells notice on both the chief financial officer and the chief information security officer of SolarWinds. So that began personal investigations of those two individuals and their decision making in their roles within SolarWinds. And so CISOs and CFOs and corporate leaders are now taking notice that their decision-making relative to cyber may become investigatory material when the incident is well and done and over. So it ties everything together. the original notice, the subsequent filings, the overall management of the incident, and how the company is addressing incident response and how they think about cybersecurity all up. That puts a lot more responsibility on a CISO's shoulders and a lot more oversight coming from a government regulator. So the rules of the game have changed.
And that Wells notice, that was fairly unique, if not, there aren't many of them that I'm aware of.
That was very unique. Watching the Wells notice is a well-known tool that the SEC has, right? So it's not new to the SEC. It's unique to see that it's being used in a cybersecurity investigation against both a CFO and a CISO to investigate their decision-making processes after the fact of a major incident. That was, we all know, launched by a major nation state funded by a government as a national security incident. So that's going to cause CISOs around the world to take notice.
So there are mandates around establishing reporting processes while managing material risks, et cetera. How tricky is that balance going to be for a CISO to report accurately, not increase their exposure to additional risk, et cetera?
So I think CISOs will have to learn how to lean on their lawyers to write those disclosures and work with them and have a really clear fact pattern of what happened. We call it the clue rule. Colonel Mustard in the library with the candlestick. Right? You have to get very crisp and use very clear terms when you're filing those SEC notices. But it also means that the CISO has to be very careful, because the statements that they make to the commission and the decisions that they make inside the company can then be investigated after the fact, which has not only corporate liability and responsibility, but individual liability and responsibility. And that gets really expensive when you're going through an SEC investigation and you have to pay for that out of your own pocket. So that's something that CISOs are really going to have to look at and then negotiate with their companies.